In 1990, one of the great film trilogies of all time came to an end when Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather 3 hit the movie theaters. I remember walking down to the Indiana Theater on Kirkwood in a mild January to catch the final film in one of my favorite all-time movie franchises. While not nearly as good as its predecessors, it was still good enough for me. And while I enjoyed the film, it was one particular scene that sat with me over the years. A frustrated and angry Al Pacino having an impromptu meeting in his kitchen, trying to keep his cool. He growls, "Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in." I don't know why the line resonated with me. I was young and just finishing up school, getting ready to start my career with the Bloomington Police Department. I had my whole life ahead of me, and I was excited to get it started. This is the line of an old man, one who has most of their life behind them, one who is tired, worn out, and ready to relax on the results of their decades of hard work. Not a statement of youth, but it stuck with me. Fast forward to the end of my 30-year career in law enforcement. I was prepared to step away from policing, but so many of my colleagues end up right back where they started. They retire only to take a job as a police reserve or a part-time officer, or take a civilian job within the same organization. While that was never for me, I understand it. And since it happens a lot, we might as well discuss it. It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. When I retired from the Bloomington Police Department, I was done. I knew that walking out the door. There was no way I was going to go back to the department and work for them again. I was moving on with my life. But to be fair, it was easy for me. I had prepared for retirement. I had followed the Dave Ramsey financial plan and was debt-free save for my home mortgage. I had a substantial emergency fund, and I had a job, teaching. I started traveling the country and teaching right away, and I have to say, being my own boss was a massive benefit. But most officers, when they retire, aren't in the same position. Many of them haven't prepared for the possibility of retirement. They haven't put away any money. They have no idea what they're going to do. And that hurts. When you combine the challenges of financial needs, the lack of social interaction, boredom, and the loss of identity of being a cop, going back to the job is easy to understand. Let's take a moment and look at each of those reasons for going back to the job. Let's start with insufficient retirement funds. When did you start putting away for retirement? Nick Doherty talked about pensions and how they're becoming rarer across the United States. That means that many of you have retirement based on a combination of monies being paid by the agency and monies pulled from your check every 2 weeks. And let's be honest, when you were a rookie, you made sure that they only pulled out the bare minimum each paycheck for retirement. As the years went by and your paychecks increased, you never went back and had them boost the retirement money. You also decided that since you had a pension, you didn't need any further retirement plans, no 457Bs, no Roth IRAs, you got a pension. Then retirement came along. Maybe it was planned or maybe it wasn't. But when you looked at how much money you had for retirement, you got sick to your stomach. You can't pay your bills with that. I'm going to have to take another full-time job. And this is where it gets interesting. What skills do you have to get a full-time job with pay and benefits that is anywhere close to what you were making as a 20-year cop? You guessed it, nowhere. Going back to the job just seems to make sense. It's where you're comfortable, and it's easy with little or no transition. And most agencies are dying to have you. With the shortages in law enforcement across the U.S., you can have your pick of agencies with signing bonuses. Hell, your old agency might pay you more to come back. A good friend of mine retired from the job a couple of years ago. He didn't really have a retirement plan, and he's one of those guys that doesn't do well sitting around. Over the 2 years that he was gone, the department got significant raises, and he started to do a little investigating. By hiring back on the department he had retired from, he would get an $11,000 raise to his pension for walking in the door and staying one day. One day would get him $11,000 a year raise on his pension. Now, you might think that the department wouldn't be interested in hiring an old guy who was only coming back as a money grab, but they were happy to get him. They were hurting for people so badly they couldn't wait to hire him back and get him on the street. When you take the concept of comfort, identity, financial security, and a true desire of the department to take you back, that's hard to beat. Next, we have boredom and lack of purpose. This is a big one. The social and emotional challenges that retirees face is a lot bigger than most people realize. They've spent their entire life working to help other people, dedicated to something special and to making a difference. Then, in just a day's time, none of that matters anymore. The biggest stress of the day is deciding which news program to watch. Some people can adapt to that quickly, but without a sense of purpose, without an identity, and without social support, many retirees struggle. And unfortunately, some might even take their own life. Going back on the job, either in a full-time or even part-time capacity, can really make the difference for them. One of my detectives was ready to retire. He was tired of the daily grind of the detective vision, and with retirement age looming and the social unrest on the horizon, he decided it was time to go. But he never really left. He retired as a police officer and 2 weeks later walked back in the door at the department as one of our civilian evidence technicians. And he loved it. Responding to scenes, gathering evidence, managing evidence, and running the property room was simple, easy, and stress-free work compared to being a lead detective. He got to take his retirement, but stay on the job. He still had coffee and lunch with his friends. He still had a purpose, and he didn't get bored. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
The Legal Liability Risk Management Institute is the nation's largest provider of liability and risk management services in the United States. Our goal is to help reduce liability, reduce lawsuits, and enhance officer performance. Regardless of the size of your agency, we have a risk management solution. You may contact us at www.llrmi.com or call 317-386-8325.
At this point, you might be wondering what kind of jobs I'm talking about when I say they pull me back in. Let's start with what I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about second careers in policing at agencies other than the one you retired from. That was a mouthful. Let me try that again. If you retire from your department and then take a cop job at another agency, that's different. Why? Because you're moving on. You're taking the skills that you've learned and using them in a different place. New challenges, new opportunities, and new people to interact with and learn from. New communities to police. We see this when officers retire from large departments and take jobs at small departments, like the gentleman in my opening who retired from the state police and then took a job with a much smaller and rural sheriff's department. We'll see this when officers take jobs at hospital police, university police, school resource officers, and even gaming commissions. The jobs are generally much slower paced, more security and customer service oriented, and are perfect for retiring officers. I'm also not talking about retiring officers taking peripheral jobs in law enforcement after retirement. We will commonly see officers become investigators for prosecutors' offices or private attorneys, for insurance companies and private businesses. These new jobs all focus around taking the skills learned in their law enforcement careers and making money off of those skills. I also don't count teaching, instructing, or consulting. Creating your own business and sharing the information and knowledge gained over decades of experience is also common, and it's the route I took. I am talking about those officers that go back full-time to the job they just retired from. It's a lot more common than you think. Those full-time positions are safe to the experienced officer. They pay well, and they give them a sense of purpose. We will also see officers retire and then work for the same agency as a part-time employee. No benefits, but they're able to use their skills and keep their certification by coming back and working 20 hours a week for the agency. This gives that sense of purpose in a familiar and comfortable setting, but without the full-time commitment. Often, part-time officers are called to work the special events, fairs, sporting events, parades, and all the fun stuff. So that's always a draw. Then we have the reserve officer. Many states utilize some form of reserve police officer. These are officers that are typically volunteers and receive no pay and benefits, but get to put on the uniform and work special events for the agency. Many reserve officers are brand new to policing and using the reserve program as a way to gain experience before getting a full-time cop job. Retired officers that like the idea of being a reserve are generally those officers that are set financially, but really feel that emotional hold and loss of identity upon retiring. They like to stay involved and be a part of something special, so they'll volunteer their time in exchange for the camaraderie, contact, and the ability to maintain their law enforcement certification. These officers are in it for the community. Then we have officers that move into those civilian positions at the department. These are generally officers that have decided they want out of the physical, mental, and emotional stress of being a cop, but don't want to separate from the department. This is often based on financial and emotional reasons. You just can't financially retire yet, and you still love being a part of the agency, so you take a job as a dispatcher, or an evidence tech, or drone pilot, or parking enforcement officer, or even a community service specialist. The department loves it because all of that officer's experiences and skills transfer into their new position. I worked with an officer who was a very hard worker and did a great job as a patrol officer, but after 25 plus years on the job, they just had enough. The politics, stress, uncertainty, crazy hours, and lack of community support built up over time, and they were done. But as they looked at retirement, they realized that they weren't going to be able to sit at home on the couch. They were too active for that, too healthy, and even though they had earned retirement, they were going to need something to do next. They loved being outdoors, and even though they were ready to retire, they still loved the organization. So, they retired and came back 2 weeks later as a parking officer. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, rain or shine, grab the ticket book and start walking. About 6 months into it, I stopped them in the hall one morning and asked them how it was going. Steve, I love it. No stress, lots of activity, and if somebody gets pissed, I just smile and walk off. It's the best thing I ever did. I could tell by the tan how much they were enjoying it. While I personally will wonder why someone would ever go back to the department they retired from, there are good reasons to do it. Retirement is very personal. Everyone will make their own decisions when to retire, and it will be very personal to them. Everyone will make a decision about what post-retirement is going to look like, and it will be very personal to them. There are no right or wrongs here. You put on a uniform and risked your life every day for the people and community that you loved. You have earned the right to enjoy retirement, whatever it looks like to you. And that's the story we have to tell. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.